Bill Ackman has been beaten many times.
Pershing Square took a loss of $400 million from the sell-off.
And I'm telling you, he's like the crybaby in the schoolyard. You know, I went to a tough school in Queens that they used to beat up the little Jewish boys, and he was like one of these little Jewish boys crying that the world was taking advantage of him.
There's a lot of schadenfreude going around New York City, I think, today about Bill Ackman, and we want to recognize that. I mean, a lot of people are rooting against him. It's tough. You make mistakes. It happens. At the same time, he was deeply involved in this company.
In spite of this, his firm Pershing Square Capital is managing assets of almost $19 billion with only roughly 30 employees. The AUM per employee at Pershing Square are even higher than at Tiger Global, immediately qualifying each Pershing Square employee as absolute gigabait men, no background checks needed. Who is really behind the mask of a silver-haired hedge fund investor? Is Bill Ackman a failed successor version of Warren Buffett undergoing bug fixes? Or is he nothing more than a professional gambler that gets lucky sometimes? The story of Bill Ackman has everything you need. An investor ignoring his critics who exhibits a clear alpha mindset.
Let me ask you this, though. You have had a tough year.
Yes.
It is fair to say.
Yes.
You had $20 billion under management back in March of 2015.
Yes.
Down now to about 11.4.
Something like that, yes.
I don't know if William Cohen's here. He wrote an article called "Is Bill Ackman Toast?"
I love articles like that. It motivates me every day.
A fierce rivalry that would later result in one of the most awkward hugs of all times. As well as countless lessons for every young ambitious person out there plotting their road to GOAT and is sick and tired of receiving mediocre advice from average people. Let's make Megalomania cool again. Bill Ackman is like a modern-day Roman emperor. He's from noble family background and started with a sizable plot of land, but was able to grow it into an empire. His adversaries are numerous and powerful, such as Icahn. He won many battles, but lost even more. But like the Roman military, he's known for never giving up. He is raised in Chappaqua, New York, a rather noble place around 50 kilometers north of New York City. His father, Lawrence David Ackman, is the chairman emeritus of a New York real estate financing firm, Ackman Ziff Real Estate Group, founded by his father and uncle in 1926. Generational real estate wealth. Since joining the firm in 1960, Larry Ackman has represented his clients on numerous debt, equity, sale and lease transactions. He has been responsible for some of the industry's most innovative financial structures, and his son Bill Ackman wants nothing more than one-up him at some point. You could say that Bill Ackman comes from a privileged background, but remember, good times create weak men. And Ackman didn't just maintain the family's wealth and power, he managed to grow it significantly.
As an investor, I am coldly, economically rational.
In 1988, he receives a Bachelor of Arts degree from Harvard College in Social Studies, a subject widely considered utterly useless by today's finance chads. And maybe it already was back then, because in 1992, Ackman upgrades his Bachelor of Arts with an MBA from Harvard Business School. Now, having spent the past years in university, Bill is ready to take action. And he has absolutely zero interest in going small.
Actually, my father, who's here, he told me it was a really dumb idea to start an investment fund right out of business school.
So Bill starts an investment fund right out of business school. He draws great inspiration from Warren Buffett. From a young age, and since meeting Buffett for the very first time, the mission is clear: to build a massive legacy by becoming the next Warren Buffett. A term he has been dubbed many times by mainstream media.
Well, you've known Warren for decades and decades. Bill Ackman likes to be considered a baby Buffett.
If you research closely, Ackman actually attended numerous of the famous shareholder meetings with Buffett, learning from the best and asking questions. While still in school, Ackman does not want to waste any time, and so he initiates stage 1 of his road to billionaire status. One of his classmates, David Berkowitz, an MIT engineer, always asks very intelligent questions during class. So Ackman decides that it would be good to have him on his team for whatever he attempts to build next. Bill and David start a 2-member Virgin investment club and analyze and invest in stocks after their classes. After around 1 year and graduating, they decide to attempt the jump.
I was thinking about starting my own investment firm, and I asked Richard what he thought of the idea. He said, Bill, you don't need to be old to be right. That was enough for me, and I started an investment fund.
They try to launch a fund together. The two managed to scrape together $3 million for their first fund. For anyone watching this and dreaming to raise massive amounts of money someday, Ackman has a clear message.
I was always unafraid to ask someone to invest because while capital was a commodity, good investment ideas were raw assets.
In 1992, at age 26, Ackman starts the investment firm Gotham Partners with fellow Harvard graduate David P. Berkowitz. The mission? Make small investments in public companies. A perfect testing ground for what's to become a lifelong investing career. Because Bill is not an ordinary investor. He is what we call an activist investor.
Activism is a shareholder who behaves like an owner. People call these hostile bids. It's not hostile to the shareholders of these companies. It's only hostile because it's not something that management of the target company has requested.
Activist investors buy a significant stake in a public company in order to influence how the company is run. Usually, these companies are mismanaged, have excessive costs, could be run more profitably if taken private, or have other problems the activist investor believes they can fix. That way, they are able to unlock investment returns that are not possible through conventional passive investing methods.
10, 15 times profit multiple of the original investment.
Bill's wealth building strategy can be summed up quite easily. Contrarian thinking paired with fast and risky moves. Diversification is for doubters. Bill's hedge fund Pershing Square only holds a handful of investments at any time.
Diversification is, as practiced generally, makes very little sense for anyone that knows what they're doing. Diversification is a protection against ignorance. I mean, if you want to make sure that nothing bad happens to you relative to the market, you own everything. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that is a perfectly sound approach for somebody who does not feel they know how to analyze businesses.
Right at the start of his career, Bill Ackman was about to experience one of the most transformative deals of his career. Ackman still sees this deal as one of the most significant investments of his entire career. This was the perfect opportunity. David Rockefeller is one of the most powerful investment bankers to ever walk the earth. His family, the Rockefeller clan, influenced American business history like no other. But in 1995, they are in financial trouble. Rockefeller wants to put a $1 billion plus mortgage loan on the family's Rockefeller Center, a large complex of commercial buildings in Midtown Manhattan, today known for its Christmas tree. $1 billion is a lot of money, so no bank is willing to provide the mortgage loan. But Rockefeller is no stranger to creative financial engineering and comes up with a solution. Rockefeller's solution will open the window of opportunity a tiny bit for Ackman to step in. Rockefeller sets up a public company structured as a real estate investment trust called Rockefeller Center Properties. That company then goes on to make a more than $1 billion mortgage on Rockefeller Center, with the mortgage being the public company's only asset, financed with a complicated mix of debt and equity. Here's where Ackman comes in, proving his business genius and diligence as a young Chad in his 20s. Ackman cleverly figures out that by buying stock in the public company, he can create interest in the Rockefeller Center building at a very low price. He can own 6 million square feet office space, 2 million square feet air rights, a music hall and more for a fraction of its long-term value. And the stock has come under financial pressure lately, So now is the perfect time to buy. Even today, standing in his office on the 42nd floor of 7th Avenue overlooking New York City, Ackman has an ambitious gleam in his eyes when thinking about the deal. But Ackman can't do it alone. He runs around town searching for co-investors until finally he connects with Joe Steinberg of Leucadia National Corporation. You young guns watching this video probably have no idea what kind of organization Leucadia was back then, but it was a very prestigious finance shop and is today known as Jefferies Financial Group. Long story short, the deal gets more complicated. A competing buyer consortium led by Goldman Sachs ultimately ends up winning the bid for Rockefeller Center. All kinds of stakeholders get involved, from real estate magnate Sam Zell to Donald Trump, who would later attempt to make America great again. Hence, even though Ackman ends up not winning the deal, it puts the 29-year-old on the mental map of the world's top investors. Some of the connections he makes will soon help him to get billions of assets under management. We will soon find out how. Hell, it even earns him a letter by Giga Patriarch David Rockefeller himself, thanking him for his fair behavior during the deal process. Ackman keeps the framed letter on his desk to this day. His firm Gotham Partners, suddenly in the spotlight of the New York City finance elite, has $500 million in assets under management 3 years later after the bid. Ackman feels like the master of the universe. But all that success blinds Bill, and he fails to see his downfall. Things at Gotham begin to go downhill in 1998. Ackman and Berkowitz make the fateful mistake of buying a controlling stake in a money-losing golf course operator.
Oh my God, bro. Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck, man? Get your ass on, boy. You get your goddamn ugly ass on.
They rebrand it to Gotham Golf and begin to pile up debt in order to acquire additional courses. But the debt gets too high and threatens to crush the company. To get out from all that debt, Ackman decides to engineer a merger between Gotham Golf and a cash-rich real estate company he also has a controlling stake in. The idea behind the merger is to use the cash on the balance sheet of the real estate company called First Union to bail out the struggling golf business and repay the debts. But in 2002, a judge rules against the merger and in favor of First Union's minority shareholders. These minority-holding plebs are arguing against the deal because they are getting little to no cash from it. With the merger on ice and Gotham Golf on the brink, investors start asking for their money back from Gotham Partners. On top, state and federal regulators begin looking into allegations that the hedge fund uses research reports to influence the price of stocks it owns. Bill Ackman was applying Wall Street Bets degen tactics before it was cool. Although the investigation goes nowhere, it's another black eye for Ackman. Bogged down by litigation and triggering increased concern among investors, the firm begins winding down operations in 2002 and closes its doors in 2003. But Ackman's headache is far from over, because he is about to confront his arch-enemy for the first time, not the last time. In 2003, a feud develops between Ackman and Carl Icahn over a deal involving Hallwood Realty. Icahn is known as a ruthless corporate raider, a guy you do business with only if you are in a desperate enough situation. Ackman is.
I made this money because the system is so bad, not because I'm a genius.
He sells his share of Hallwood Realty to Icahn for $80 a share to get out quickly. It is trading at $60 a share, and Ackman believed it was worth north of $100 a share. So, they agree on something called schmuck insurance in Wall Street talk, a mechanism that is often less about the money and more about protecting one's reputation. As part of this schmuck insurance, the unit purchase agreement states that if Icahn sells the shares within 3 years at a profit of 10% or higher, Ackman would be entitled to share in the sale proceeds. Under the terms of the contract, Icahn owed Ackman and his investors about $4.5 million. Icahn refused to pay. Ackman sued. 8 years later, Icahn was forced to pay the $4.5 million plus 9% interest per year by court order. Small money with massive negative consequences for Ackman, because Icahn is someone who does not forgive easily.
Talking about people at the top, their competitiveness is rooted in ego.
But first, things start taking a positive turn for Ackman. Because Bill Ackman is far from done, his next step is supposed to put him in S tier of legendary investors, next to Warren Buffett, R. Anal Farmer, and Kevin John. If you're not in the S tier of legendary investors yet, you might want to think about how to free up more time during your typical day. That's where Wing comes into play. Wing Assistant is a platform that connects small businesses and individuals with vetted remote virtual assistants based on a monthly subscription. Wing takes care of things such as assessing and interviewing the best virtual assistants, as well as payroll, benefits, and supervision of those assistants. You only need to log in and take advantage of your very own hand-picked VA. I have started using a Wing VA for things such as taking care of the paperwork during my angel investments, doing supplementary research for my YouTube videos, or even making restaurant bookings when I go on dates. Because Wing Assistant taps into the global talent pool, they are able to provide better and more affordable VAs than I could find on my own. On top, they offer a smooth working experience through things such as Slack integrations, a chat function to communicate about tasks, task management support, as well as a sleek mobile app to enable on-the-go task delegation. Click the link in the description below to explore their services and get your very own personal virtual assistant today. For everybody trying to raise a fund, remember, what's the best place to get commitments worth tens of millions of dollars from potential MPs? Apparently in Cabo San Lucas, a beautiful resort city in Mexico. Ian Cumming, chairman of Leucadia National, was vacationing at the same resort as Bill Ackman and his wife in February 2003. Ian Cumming still remembers the Rockefeller Center deal. Ackman convinced everyone through his professional behavior. He tells Ackman,
"Whenever you start something new, you want to be your partner, brethren. There's just one condition. You want to be your soul partner."
This meant Ackman cannot accept money from other potential investors. That's some conviction. So in January 2004, a new fund is born that was going to rock the finance world up until today, Pershing Square Capital. And Ackman lines up some great wins at the beginning. Wendy's is one of Ackman's first successes at the helm of Pershing. Ackman takes a 10% stake in Wendy's in 2005. The company has a $5 billion market cap, and it owns 100% of Tim Hortons, a Canadian coffee and donut chain, probably one of the most Canadian companies out there. Tim Hortons generates $400 million in operating income, and Ackman values the company at over $5 billion, a 12.5x EBIT multiple. Wendy's estimated worth is a few billion dollars as well. Meanwhile, you can buy all of Wendy's for under $5 billion. The game plan? Buy Wendy's, spin off Tim Hortons, and basically get Wendy's for free. By buying Wendy's at $38 per share, spinning off Tim Hortons, the share would double to $76 per share. Ackman proposes the Hortons spin-off to the management team of Wendy's. The deal, he argues, would allow investors to properly value both restaurant chains, not least because the synergies of the pairing are minimal, as he describes it. Listing Hortons would allow both management teams to be compensated based on the performance of the business it runs, and allow the coffee chain to attract and retain talented management. Initially, the management refuses to consider Ackman's proposal. But Ackman convinces the management to follow his suggestions. Eventually, Wendy's does spin off Hortons and takes measures to improve margins. About 1.5 years later, in November 2006, Ackman sells Wendy's. The stock has appreciated from $38 to $71, a handsome return of 87% in less than 2 years. Remember that we called Ackman a modern-day Roman emperor? Well, he's going to face his largest battle yet, a battle with massive casualties. In 2012, Ackman went to war in what was going to be one of the most prominent trades in his career.
What are we going to learn?
You're going to learn why Herbalife is going to collapse.
Ackman entered into a short position worth $1 billion in 2012, betting against the supplement company Herbalife.
There's not one of an Herbalife distributor talking to his recruits about how to sell the product, about how to make a retail sale of an Herbalife product. It's all about how to recruit people to become distributors, because that's the only way you can make money.
The claim, Herbalife is a pyramid scheme.
Give me one of those checks!
They decided to target the poorest people in the world.
We're not a pyramid scheme. That's a bogus accusation.
But right when Ackman is about to win, his archenemy shows up.
He was like one of these little Jewish boys crying.
The situation escalates.
Ultimately, the company will be held to account.
The United States will be better when Bill Ackman's gone.
Is this the most important deal of your life?
This is not a deal.
Is this important, the most important campaign?
I would say if we are successful in shutting down Herbalife, we will save a very large number of people from enormous harm. And that is probably the most significant thing, that will be one of the most significant things I've ever done for a large number of people.
Perhaps the biggest trait associated with Bill Ackman is his conviction short of health supplement company Herbalife. Herbalife tells people that they can start their own business by selling Herbalife products. In order to get started, people are forced to buy a considerable amount of Herbalife products. Then, they can try selling these products, or they can recruit more people to sell Herbalife products, which in turn they are compensated for. Ackman argues that the company is a pyramid scheme with an intrinsic value of zero.
There's not one of an Herbalife distributor talking to his recruits about how to sell the product, about how to make a retail sale of an Herbalife product. It's all about how to recruit people to become distributors, because that's the only way you can make money.
Ackman decides to put a massive amount of money where his mouth is. In 2012, Bill enters into a short position on Herbalife worth $1 billion. In an extensive research report, he lays out why exactly he thinks Herbalife is an illegal pyramid scheme. The investing world starts taking notice. In the weeks following his short position, Ackman sees Herbalife's shares plunge around 60%. Things seem to be going well for Ackman, who claims to be doing God's work with his Herbalife trade. But Herbalife will soon turn into his career's biggest nightmare. In the world of gigabatemans, nobody ever forgets, and Carl Icahn has been patiently waiting for his opportunity to take revenge on Ackman after he was forced to pay him $4.5 million. This leads to a discussion on live television between Ackman and Icahn on CNBC on January 25, 2013. The discussion has legendary status by now, one of the greatest moments in financial news history.
And I'm telling you, he's like the crybaby in the schoolyard. You know, I went to a tough school in Queens, and they used to beat up the little Jewish boys, and he was like one of these little Jewish boys crying that the world was taking advantage of him.
Ackman promised to give his gains from the Herbalife trade to charity. Icahn disagrees.
Then he talks about charity. That's complete bull. He's not giving it to charity. His limited partners aren't going to give it to charity, as assuming they don't need charity themselves.
And when Icahn gets bored slamming Ackman, he starts shooting against the journalist.
Carl, why don't you just come clean on the Herbalife thing? Are you long or not? Right? I mean, the whole market knows or suspects that you are.
I didn't get on to be bullied by you. Okay? If I could talk, let me talk. But I don't need you to. Hello?
Yeah, I'm here. No one's bullying you, Carl. I mean, I'm just, you're the one who called in to our show to talk to Bill Ackman, and the principal issue is the Herbalife thing.
Listen to me. I was called in by Max Meyer to have a conversation, not to argue with you. All right? If you want to take... Hello?
Yeah, we're listening.
Well, if you're listening, let me talk. I want to say what I want to say, and I'm not going to talk about my Herbalife position because you want to bully me. All right?
I'm not bullying you. I'm asking the question everybody wants to know, Carl. That's all. But you can make your statement.
What you want to know. I'm going to talk about what I want to talk about. And if you want to take that position, I'll never go on CNBC, you know? So you can say what the hell you want, but I'm going to tell you, I'm going to talk about what Ackman just said about me, not about Herbalife. And I'll talk about Herbalife when I want to, not when you ask me.
Okay.
And I'm never going on a show with you again. That's for damn sure, okay? So let's start with what I want to say. Ackman is a liar, okay? To begin with, I've lived my life from 1960s and 70s by handshakes. I almost lost my firm a few times by handshakes. Ackman does pump and dump. He's got one of the worst reputations on Wall Street.
This is the beginning of the end for Ackman's Herbalife trade. Shortly thereafter, Icahn buys shares of Herbalife International. As Icahn continues to buy up Herbalife shares, the stock price continues to show strength. By May 2013, Icahn owns 16.5% of the company. Everybody on Wall Street is talking about the deal. On November 22, 2013, Ackman admits on Bloomberg television that Pershing Square's open short position in Herbalife is $400 to $500 million in the red, but that he won't be squeezed out and will hold the short to the end of the earth. In 2014, Ackman starts another attempt at getting the message out about Herbalife. He spends $50 million on a public relations campaign against Herbalife, which is designed to hurt the company's stock price. But it's too late. In March 2014, the New York Times reports that Ackman had employed tactics to undermine public confidence in Herbalife to lower its stock price, including pressuring state and federal regulators to investigate the company, paying individuals to participate in rallies against Herbalife, and other ways of getting the word out about Herbalife. And now, the worst thing is about to happen. Ackman is still hoping for the FTC to uncover illegal wrongdoings at Herbalife, eventually even banning the company from further operations. Instead, in July 2016, Herbalife and the FTC reach a settlement agreement, ending the agency's investigation into the company. FTC will not classify it as a pyramid scheme.
It's a case of good news, bad news. For embattled company Herbalife, the Federal Trade Commission will not classify it as a pyramid scheme, but in return, Herbalife will pay a settlement of $200 million.
On the day of the settlement, Ackman loses an estimated $500 million, according to Fortune. In November 2017, Ackman tells Reuters that he has covered his short sell position, but will continue to bet against Herbalife using put options with no more than 3% of Pershing Square's funds. But in 2018, Ackman exits his entire short bet on Herbalife. Herbalife proved to be one of Ackman's most fatal battles. For any one of you still watching up to this point, listen. Just like myself, you are a young, ambitious person with big megalomaniacal dreams. The problem, though, is most people don't dream as big as we do. And this makes it very hard to find other like-minded megalomaniacs to support each other. On the contrary, the more time you spend around average people with average dreams, the faster you become average yourself. That's why I'm so proud of the small Discord community we have. We talk about the basics, like how to get into consulting, banking, or PE, or how to build side income. But we also talk about the big goals others don't dare talk about. Starting funds, building massive enterprises, becoming the next Steven Schwartzman. As we want to keep the community tight, there is still a couple of spots left. The link is in the description. Join us and let's build wealth and power together. And above all, make Megalomania cool again. Back to Bill. Herbalife proved to be one of Ackman's most fatal battles. Little does he know that hell was going to continue. Ackman first starts working with Valeant, a multinational pharmaceutical company, in 2014. Valeant adopted a strategy of buying up other pharmaceutical companies which manufacture effective medications for a variety of medical problems and then increasing the price of those medications.
To save your life was only $1,000. The companies before us were actually just giving it away almost.
That was Martin Shkreli last week, trying to defend his 5,000% increase in the price of an essential drug. This week, it's Valeant Pharmaceuticals, a Quebec-based company under fire for hiking the price of two rare heart drugs.
As a result, the company grows rapidly and in 2015 is the most valuable company in Canada. There are three things that Ackman loves about the company: the business model, the lucrative compensation plans, and the CEO Michael Pearson, who worked for McKinsey for 23 years before joining Valeant. But soon his career will come to a terrible ending. Pearson and Ackman are about to stir shit up in the pharma industry in the way that only Martin Shkreli can relate to. First step, acquire another big drug maker, Allergan. Ackman, who likes Pearson, sees an opportunity to make money. How? Pershing Square takes a big stake in Allergan, hoping to use this large investment to prod the drug maker to sell itself to Valeant. In the months after the investment, Valeant and Ackman make multiple bids for Allergan, even pressing a tender offer at one point. However, Allergan's CEO David Pyatt is not interested in a deal with Valeant. He already senses that something is off about Valeant. He even goes as far as calling it a house of cards, fueled by drug price increases and shoddy accounting. To stop Valeant's takeover attempts, Allergan has to find a so-called white knight, someone who will acquire the company and save it from the hostile acquirer. For Ackman, it's all fugazi at this point. He'll make money either way. When Allergan finds a white knight in a foreign drug maker called Actavis in 2014, the sales price generates a massive profit for Ackman. That year, Allergan gains help Pershing Square gain 37% net of fees, generating a windfall of about $1 billion for Ackman. But instead of realizing the gains and moving on, Ackman jumps right back in with Pearson's Valeant. He even goes as far as calling Valeant the next Berkshire Hathaway of pharma. He couldn't be more wrong this time. He takes the Allergan winnings and becomes one of Valeant's biggest shareholders. At first, Ackman's investment in Valeant seems like another winner, but within months, the company starts collapsing. Valeant is under fire for boosting drug prices. You could say they gave off strong Shkreli vibes. On top, they were pushing their drugs through dubious methods that were not completely disclosed to investors. And there were questions over the company's accounting practices as well. Pearson took a lot of measures to engineer a high stock price, and Ackman bought right into it at the top. Ackman tries to save the day and publicly defends the company.
You serious?
But it's too late. The stock price crashes. As a consequence, Pearson gets pushed out from his CEO position. Federal prosecutors and regulators start investigating the company. Ackman sticks around for some time, even joining the board and trying to turn things around. But the situation is hopeless. In 2014, Ackman exits his position in Valeant with a nearly $4 billion loss over a 2-year period. Assets under management at Ackman's Pershing Square hedge fund dropped from more than $20 billion in the summer of 2015 to $11 billion, and Ackman falls off the Forbes 400 list of richest Americans. Ackman is beaten. Most betas around the world would give up at this point. That's because no beta on Earth has what we call the Bateman gene. Ackman has it. And COVID is the perfect opportunity for him to make one of the greatest business moves of all time.
I do right now, though, want to bring in Bill Ackman on the phone. He took to Twitter today to urge the president to take more dramatic measures to stop the spread of the virus. Bill, I thank you for joining us today.
During this interview, Ackman was in the process of liquidating half of a position that would be later referred to as the greatest deal of all time, increasing 100x in value. A trade that turned 27 million into 2.6 billion in a 30-day period.
He's not saying, he's not saying to storm the beaches at Normandy, right? He's saying, go home. Go home. Spend a month with your family.
When the pandemic starts in late 2019, Bill Ackman gets incredibly nervous. At first, he even thinks about liquidating all his assets into cash. But then, he has an idea how to take advantage of the situation. He updates his shareholders with an ominous message on March 3rd.
During the past 10 days, we have taken steps to protect the portfolio from downward market volatility. We have done so because we believe that efforts to contain the coronavirus are likely to have a substantial negative impact on the US and global economies, and on equity and credit markets.
Ackman is utilizing CDS, credit default swaps, to bring this trade to life.
They can be a very destructive instrument. I mean, if you think about it, you can't go out and insure my house against fire because you do not have an insurable interest, as they call it in the trade. Because once you insure my house against fire, and you may decide that, that maybe dropping a few matches around my lawn might be a good idea.
Why does he buy a credit default swap instead of simply shorting? Credit default swaps are much safer because losses are limited, compared to the possibility of infinite losses when shorting bonds or stocks. One example is a house that you bet will burn down, so you buy fire insurance on it. You will have to pay monthly fees on the insurance contract until the house burns down or until the contract time expires. If the house does not burn down during that time period, then you only lose the limited amount of money that you paid on the insurance contracts over that time period. If instead you shorted the house with the hopes of it burning down, then the amounts of money you could lose are unlimited. By buying credit default swaps, Ackman limits his losses to about 1.56 billion in the worst case scenario. But Ackman is prepared to do anything to tilt the game in his favor. So he uses one of his most important instruments as an activist investor. He goes on CNBC and gives a very controversial interview.
Hell is coming, okay? And I felt, it's really, I've never had this experience before in my life. The closest I had was the financial crisis where I'm saying, things are coming, bad stuff's coming. But this was a feeling like I've never had. Like there's a tsunami coming, right? The tsunami's coming in, you feel it in the air.
Within 30 days of Ackman placing his CDS trade and buying insurance on the US economy, so to say, the market completely collapses and Ackman's bet works out, with Pershing Square pocketing $2.6 billion.
Tell them to bring me my money.
A mind-bogglingly high return. Why is his gain so large? Essentially because he bought a shit ton of insurance. Yes, he had to pay 27 million, but he had to pay that every month for 5 years. This means that Ackman would have to pay 324 million a year in premiums until he sells his position and makes a profit or the time expires. By dividing 324 million in monthly premiums for a year by the 0.5% CD insurance rate, you will get 64.8 billion worth of bonds that Ackman was buying protection on. The entire US market has $6 trillion in investment-grade bonds. This means Ackman was essentially buying protection on around 1% of all corporate bonds in the market. Massive. Ackman is back on top again. Fast forward to today, and he gets in trouble again. In January 2022, Ackman discloses that Pershing Square acquired a $1.1 billion stake in video sharing platform Netflix. Netflix stock has just experienced a strong sell-off after a disappointing subscriber growth outlook for Q1 2022. Ackman senses an opportunity and gets in on it.
This morning, Bill Ackman has now taken a stake in Netflix. The billionaire hedge fund manager saying he bought more than 3.1 million shares after the stock had plunged last week. That makes him a top 20 shareholder. In a tweet just yesterday, Ackman said, quote, "I have long admired Reed Hastings and the remarkable company he and his team have built. We're delighted that the market has now presented us with this opportunity."
He has long been an admirer of Netflix blue-pilled CEO Reed Hastings and the remarkable company he and his team have built.
We don't have a vacation policy. You take whatever you want. We don't have an expense policy. You spend as you think appropriate.
In April, Netflix stock falls by 35% and Ackman responds by selling his entire stake in the company. Cumulative loss? Around $400 million US. As funny as it seems, this also shows that Ackman does indeed learn from his mistakes in the past.
The guy in the past probably would have doubled down. And frankly, yesterday when I saw the huge slide, I was thinking to myself, boy, I wonder if he's buying more, because the old Bill would have bought more. And he would have told you all the reasons.
What is left of the man who was once called the next Warren Buffett during his heydays? Is Bill Ackman beaten? Or is he doing just fine? His fund, since inception until 2020, has returned 885% versus the S&P's 259%. About a 15% yearly return for Ackman versus only 7.5% of the market. For viewers looking to start a career in investing themselves, Bill comes up with a good strategy on how to build a successful finance career.
Sure. So I think the best thing, the investing business you can learn by reading. You know, read everything Warren Buffett's ever written, watch every YouTube video he's ever appeared in. That's a great way to learn about investing. But investing is more than just, the way to really understand investing is to understand a business. And one of the most important skills you need as an investor is distinguishing between a great business, a good business, a fair business, and a bad business. And one way to get a sense of the quality of a business is go to work for one. So the recommendation I give to people graduating from business schools these days is this is the greatest time in history to work for a startup. There are lots of incredibly interesting businesses being formed. And if you can be one of the early employees, you're going to learn a lot about how a business works, how to make payroll, how to market your product, how to design something. And those skills, I think, are invaluable. First of all, you might even find it really interesting. You might have joined the next Facebook, so that's one thing. Even if the business fails, you'll learn a ton from that. I think that's the best experience you can get, ultimately, to be a good fundamental investor.
It will be interesting to observe if Bill is going to double down on his activist investor style, or he is going to be more passive in the future. For every ambitious person watching this and feeling inspired by the story of Bill and the activist investor breed, you need to think about how social media can take activist investment styles to the next level. The advent of Twitter, Wall Street bets degenerates, and gigachat degens like Elon Musk pumping Dogecoin proves that it's an interesting world for activist investors who manage to craft a coherent strategy that fits this environment. There's many more questions that could be explored about Bill in upcoming analyses. Will he ape into crypto at some point? Will he manage to up his Twitter game, which currently sometimes seems erratic? What would Paul Allen do if he was at the helm of Pershing Square Capital? It's clear that Ackman has been humbled by the experiences he made in the past 20 years. The question is, if that humbleness will take his investing performance to new heights. Lastly, if you're interested in seeing real alpha male behavior in action, take a look at the beginning of this panel discussion with Bill Ackman.
For those of you who have not been to the Said Business School before, welcome to Said Business School and welcome to the University of Oxford. Just out of curiosity, how many of you are students from the university but not from the business school? Excellent. Welcome to Said. I'm delighted this afternoon, I'll sit because that's what I'm going to be doing all afternoon. I'm delighted to welcome this afternoon Bill Ackman, CEO of Pershing Square Capital, which is a multi-billion-dollar investment fund that takes long-term positions and investments in companies and then works with them, sometimes very publicly, to improve their performance.
Yo brethren, suggestion, should we form an activist hedge fund based off this YouTube channel and take on the old money Wall Street titans with an army of social media degens?